She'd been flying private jets for wealthy clients for 12 years, keeping her head down and her past buried. Just another corporate pilot in a pressed uniform. Until that turbulent flight when her old military call sign slipped out under pressure, and the billionaire in first class went pale with recognition. Welcome to Duty Stories. Before we dive into this incredible story of hidden wings and unexpected revelation, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe every veteran service deserves recognition, hit that subscribe button. These stories need to be heard. The Gulfstream G650 sat gleaming on the tarmac at Teterboro Airport, its white fuselage reflecting the morning sun like polished steel. At $70 million, it was one of the most advanced private jets in the world, capable of flying nonstop from New York to Tokyo with a cabin that resembled a luxury hotel more than an aircraft. Captain Sarah Chen performed her pre-flight inspection with methodical precision, checking every surface, every seal, every instrument with the kind of attention to detail that separated exceptional pilots from merely good ones. At 45, she had the quiet confidence that came from over 20,000 flight hours, though most people assumed those hours had been accumulated flying corporate executives and celebrities between business meetings and vacation destinations. They were wrong. Sarah had been working for Meridian Aviation, one of the country's most exclusive private jet companies, for 12 years. Her clients included Fortune 500 CEOs, Hollywood stars, tech billionaires, and occasionally, government officials who preferred to travel without the attention that came with military aircraft. She was known for three things: punctuality, discretion, and an almost supernatural ability to navigate any weather condition. "Chen's the best we have," Meridian's CEO had told prospective clients more than once. Former military, nerves of steel, and she treats every flight like it's carrying the president. What he didn't know was how close to the truth that statement actually was. Sarah's employment file at Meridian listed military aviation experience, without specifics, along with impeccable references from a freight company that specialized in international cargo. Her FAA certifications were current, her background check was clean, and her flying record was spotless. Nothing in her file mentioned her 20-year career in the United States Navy, her service as a Top Gun instructor, or the classified missions that had earned her the call sign Phoenix. That information was buried in files so deep that even she sometimes wondered if it had really happened. This particular morning, Sarah was preparing for what seemed like a routine flight, New York to Los Angeles, carrying tech billionaire Marcus Webb and his small entourage. Webb was the founder of Nexus Technologies, a company that had revolutionized cloud computing and made him one of the richest men in America. He was also known for his philanthropy, his love of vintage aircraft, and his habit of conducting business meetings at 40,000 feet. "Good morning, Captain Chen," Webb said as he boarded, followed by his assistant and two security personnel. "Beautiful day for flying." "Yes, sir, Mr. Webb. We'll have clear skies most of the way, with some possible turbulence over the Rockies. Flight time should be approximately 5 hours and 20 minutes. Webb settled into his leather seat and opened his laptop. "Excellent. I have some calls to make once we're airborne." Sarah had flown Webb a dozen times over the past 2 years. He was one of her favorite clients, polite, professional, and genuinely interested in aviation. Unlike some passengers who treated her like an invisible chauffeur, Webb always asked about the flight plan and showed respect for her expertise. What Sarah didn't know was that Webb had been quietly investigating her background for months, not out of suspicion, but out of curiosity. Something about her flying style, her calm under pressure, and the way she handled the aircraft suggested military training that went far beyond standard commercial aviation. The takeoff from Teterboro was smooth, and Sarah climbed to their cruising altitude of 41,000 feet with the kind of precision that made flying look effortless. The passengers settled in for the cross-country journey, and for the first 3 hours, everything proceeded normally. Then the weather changed. "Captain, we're showing a rapidly developing storm system ahead," came the voice of air traffic control. "Recommend deviation south to avoid severe turbulence and possible wind shear." Sarah studied her weather radar, frowning at the massive storm cell that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. The recommended deviation would add significant time to their flight and take them through restricted military airspace. Roger, ATC. Request clearance for southern route deviation. Negative, Captain. Military exercises in that sector. You'll need to either turn back or proceed through the storm. Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with impossible decisions. In the cabin, Webb looked up from his laptop, noticing the change in the aircraft's movement as she adjusted course. "Everything all right, Captain?" he asked over the intercom. "Just some weather ahead, Mr. Webb. Nothing we can't handle." But as they approached the storm cell, Sarah realized this wasn't ordinary turbulence. The radar showed a supercell with wind speeds that could tear apart even a well-built aircraft. Lightning flashed outside the windows, and the first jolts of severe turbulence began rocking the Gulf Stream. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Chen. We're experiencing some rough air. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." The aircraft lurched violently, dropping nearly 1,000 feet in seconds before Sarah regained control. In the cabin, laptops and coffee cups went flying. The lights flickered, and the aircraft's warning systems began chiming. "Captain," Webb's voice came over the intercom, strained but calm. That was significant. Sarah didn't respond. She was too busy fighting the aircraft through wind shear that would have overwhelmed most pilots. The Gulf Stream bucked and rolled like a bronco, its advanced fly-by-wire system struggling to maintain stability. Then the left engine's warning light illuminated. "Engine compressor stall," Sarah muttered, going through emergency procedures with mechanical precision. But even as she worked to restart the engine, another massive downdraft caught the aircraft. This time, the drop was severe enough to trigger the aircraft's terrain avoidance system. Alarms blared as the Gulf Stream fell toward the mountains below, its remaining engine struggling against the chaotic air currents. In that moment, faced with the possibility of losing the aircraft and everyone aboard, Sarah's military training took over completely. "Mayday, mayday," she called out, her voice cutting through the radio static. "This is Phoenix, declaring emergency. Engine failure and severe weather. Request immediate vector to nearest suitable airport." The call sign slipped out without conscious thought. A reflex burned into her neural pathways by thousands of hours of high-stress flying. It wasn't until the silence that followed that she realized what she'd said. In the cabin, Marcus Webb went completely still. His laptop slid forgotten to the floor as he stared toward the cockpit with an expression of recognition and disbelief. "Roger. Phoenix," came the hesitant response from air traffic control. "Say again your call sign." Sarah's hands tightened on the controls as she fought to level the aircraft. The left engine was completely dead now, and she was flying on one engine through some of the worst weather she'd encountered in 2 decades of flying. "This is Gulfstream N847MW, she corrected, forcing her voice to remain calm. "Requesting immediate clearance to Denver International." But the damage was done. That single word, Phoenix, had shattered the carefully constructed wall between her past and present. 20 minutes later, after the most challenging single-engine approach of her civilian career, Sarah brought the Gulfstream down safely at Denver International Airport. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft as it rolled to a stop, but everyone aboard was unharmed. As the passengers disembarked, Webb lingered behind. When the cabin was empty except for the two of them, he spoke quietly. "Phoenix was your call sign." It wasn't a question. Sarah finished her post-flight checks before turning to face him. "I don't know what you mean, Mr. Webb." "Captain Sarah Chen, call sign Phoenix. Navy fighter pilot, Top Gun instructor, classified operations in the Middle East." Webb's voice was filled with something between awe and respect. "You saved a carrier group during Operation Desert Storm when their escort fighters were grounded by a sandstorm." Sarah's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "How do you?" "Because I was there," Webb said softly. "Lieutenant Marcus Webb, communications officer aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt. I was on the bridge when you and your wingman held off enemy aircraft for 3 hours while the fleet repositioned. The silence that followed was heavy with memory. Sarah sank into the pilot's seat, suddenly looking older than her years. "That was a long time ago," she said finally. 23 years, Webb confirmed. "I've been trying to figure out where I knew you from since the first time you flew me. Something about your voice, your bearing. Then today, when you pulled off that approach and whether that should have been impossible." Webb sat down across from her. "The Phoenix I remember wouldn't have called in the call sign accidentally. She was too disciplined, too careful." Sarah looked out at the emergency vehicles still surrounding their aircraft. "People change, Mr. Webb. Priorities shift. What happened? Why are you flying corporate jets instead of leading squadrons?" The question hung in the air between them. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands that had once gripped the controls of an F/18 Hornet while dodging surface-to-air missiles over hostile territory. "Do you remember Operation Sacred Thunder?" she asked finally. Webb's expression grew serious. "The mission that was classified above my clearance level. November 15th, 2001. 6 weeks after September 11th. Intelligence indicated a terrorist cell was planning to use stolen aircraft for another attack. We were tasked with intercepting and, if necessary, shooting down civilian aircraft over American soil." Sarah's voice was steady, but Webb could see the pain in her eyes. "My flight was scrambled when a hijacked passenger jet lost communication over Nevada. 230 passengers aboard, including families returning from vacation. Our orders were clear. If the aircraft deviated toward any major population center, we were to engage." Webb waited, understanding that this was a story she'd never told. "For 47 minutes, I flew escort on that aircraft. The pilot was dead, shot by hijackers. The plane was on autopilot, slowly descending toward Las Vegas. 200,000 people on the ground, 230 in the air." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. "I had weapons locked. My finger was on the trigger. I was prepared to kill those passengers to save the people on the ground." "What happened?" "A flight attendant named Maria Santos made it to the cockpit. She was a private pilot, barely qualified to fly a Cessna, but she managed to regain control of a Boeing 737, changed course, landed safely at McCarran Airport. Everyone survived." Webb began to understand. "But you were prepared to pull the trigger." "For 47 minutes, I was ready to murder innocent people because someone in a secure room told me it was necessary. That night, I submitted my resignation from active duty." "You saved thousands of lives by being ready to make an impossible decision." Sarah shook her head. "I traumatized myself by being ready to kill innocent people. There's a difference." Webb studied her face, seeing the weight she'd carried for over 2 decades. "So you became a corporate pilot to what? Penance. To remember what flying should be about. Getting people safely from one place to another. No weapons, no targeting systems, no life-or-death decisions. Just aviation in its purest form." Webb was quiet for several minutes, processing everything she'd told him. Finally, he spoke. "Do you know what I do with my technology company, Captain?" "Cloud computing, data storage, enterprise solutions." "That's the public face. The classified contracts are different. We provide secure communications for humanitarian organizations, early warning systems for natural disasters, encrypted networks for refugee coordination." Webb leaned forward. "What I'm saying is, I use technology to save lives. The same way you use aviation skills to ensure people get home safely to their families." "It's not the same thing, Mr. Webb. Isn't it? You just brought us through whether that would have killed us with the lesser pilot. You made decisions under pressure that saved 4 lives. How is that different from what you did in the Navy?" Sarah stood up, beginning to gather her flight gear. "Because no one was shooting at us. But the stakes were just as high. The skill required was just as demanding. The only difference is the uniform." As they prepared to leave the aircraft, Webb made an unexpected request. "I'd like to offer you a job, Captain." Sarah paused. "I already have a job, Mr. Webb." "Not as a pilot. As a consultant. I'm working on a project that could revolutionize search and rescue operations. Real-time weather analysis, automated flight path optimization, emergency response coordination. I need someone who understands both the technology and the human element. You need an engineer, not a pilot. I need someone who's made life and death decisions at 30,000 feet. Someone who understands that technology is only as good as the person using it. Someone with the call sign Phoenix. Sarah looked at him sharply. I don't use that name anymore. Maybe it's time you did. Not as a weapon, but as a symbol of rising from difficult circumstances. 3 months later, Sarah found herself in a situation she'd never expected, sitting in a conference room at Nexus Technologies, reviewing proposals for an advanced search and rescue system. Her new title was Director of Aviation Safety Systems, and her job was to ensure that the technology they developed would actually save lives instead of just generating profits. The current proposal calls for fully automated emergency response, explained Dr. Jennifer Yates, the project's lead engineer. Remove human error from the equation entirely. Sarah studied the technical specifications. What happens when a system encounters a situation it wasn't programmed for? Machine learning algorithms will adapt and evolve. Algorithms don't have instincts, Dr. Yates. They can't feel when something is wrong before the instruments show it. Webb, who had been listening quietly, smiled. Explain. 3 months ago, when our engine failed, the aircraft systems said we should continue to the original destination. Every algorithm, every decision tree pointed to that choice. But my instincts said the storm was getting worse, that we needed to land immediately. Sarah stood up, moving to the whiteboard. You can't program intuition. You can't code the ability to read a situation that's never happened before and make the right choice anyway. Dr. Yates frowned. Are you suggesting we abandon automation entirely? I'm suggesting we design systems that amplify human decision-making instead of replacing it. Give pilots better information, faster processing, clearer options, but leave the final decision to the person who has to live with the consequences. Over the following year, Sarah's team developed what became known as the Phoenix system, a search and rescue coordination platform that combined artificial intelligence with human judgment. The system could process vast amounts of data, predict weather patterns, optimize flight paths, and coordinate multiple aircraft. But it always presented options to human operators rather than making autonomous decisions. The first major test came during Hurricane Miranda, when the system coordinated the rescue of over 300 people stranded by flooding in Louisiana. Traditional rescue operations would have taken days. The Phoenix system managed it in 18 hours. It's not the technology that saved those people, Sarah told a reporter who asked about the success. It's the combination of technology and human expertise. The system gave our pilots the information they needed to make good decisions quickly. The reporter pressed for more details about Sarah's background, but she deflected. She still wasn't comfortable with publicity, still preferred to work behind the scenes. 6 months later, Webb found Sarah in her office late one evening, reviewing flight data from a rescue operation in the Pacific. You know, you could be running your own company by now, he said. Half the aerospace industry is trying to recruit you. Sarah didn't look up from her screens. I'm happy where I am. Are you? Or are you still hiding from who you used to be? That got her attention. I'm not hiding. I'm using my experience differently. Webb sat down across from her desk. Sarah, do you know how many lives the Phoenix system has saved in the past year? It's not about the numbers, Marcus. 1,437 people. Search and rescue operations that succeeded because pilots had better information and support. Coast Guard missions that found survivors because weather prediction was more accurate. Medical evacuations that reached hospitals in time because flight paths were optimized. Sarah finally looked at him. What's your point? My point is that you've saved more lives in the past 2 years than most pilots save in their entire careers, and you've done it without firing a single shot. Webb pulled out a small object and placed it on her desk. It was a military challenge coin, but not one she recognized. On one side was the phoenix rising from flames. On the other was simple text, Sarah Chen Phoenix, lives saved, 1,437 and counting. The teams that use our system wanted to make sure you knew your impact, Webb explained. Every pilot, every rescue coordinator, every dispatcher who's used Phoenix system knows it wouldn't exist without you. Sarah picked up the coin, feeling its weight. They don't know about my Navy service. No, but they know about your dedication to saving lives. They know about the impossible flights you've made to deliver medical supplies. They know about the training programs you've developed. They know about the safety innovations you've championed. Webb leaned forward. Sarah, you spent 20 years as Phoenix the Warrior. You've spent the last 15 years as Phoenix the Guardian. Both versions saved lives. Both versions mattered. That night, Sarah drove to a small airfield outside the city, where she kept a restored P-51 Mustang, a vintage fighter from World War II. She'd bought it years ago, but rarely flew it, finding it too reminiscent of her military days. As she performed the pre-flight inspection, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the carrier decks of the Persian Gulf to the boardrooms of Silicon Valley, from shooting down enemy aircraft to coordinating rescue operations, from Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen to Captain Chen to Director Chen. But always, in the moments that mattered most, she was Phoenix. She climbed into the cockpit and started the Merlin engine, feeling the power that had once ruled the skies. As she taxied to the runway, she made a decision she'd been avoiding for 15 years. Tower, this is November 51 Phoenix, requesting permission for takeoff. The old call sign felt right on her lips. As the Mustang climbed into the evening sky, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The joy of flight without the weight of combat, the thrill of aviation without the fear of warfare. Below her, the lights of the city spread out like stars, each one representing lives that continued safely because people like her had chosen to serve, to protect, to save rather than destroy. Her radio crackled with a message from the tower. Phoenix, you have beautiful aircraft. Fly safe out there. Thank you, tower. Phoenix is back where she belongs. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the Nexus Technologies office to find Webb waiting with a small team of engineers and a stack of new project proposals. We've got a request from the National Guard, he announced. They want to adapt the Phoenix system for wildfire suppression, better coordination between air and ground teams, improved pilot safety, more effective resource allocation. Sarah studied the specifications, already seeing ways to improve the technology. When do we start? How about now, Phoenix? She smiled, finally comfortable with the name that had once defined her. Let's get to work. 2 years later, at ceremony honoring innovations in emergency response, Sarah stood before an audience of pilots, engineers, and emergency responders. She'd been asked to speak about the development of the Phoenix system and its impact on search and rescue operations. When I left the military 15 years ago, she began, I thought I was leaving behind everything that defined me. My call sign, my mission, my purpose. I became a corporate pilot because I wanted to fly without the weight of life and death decisions. She paused, looking out at the audience. What I learned is that you can't escape who you are, and you shouldn't try to. The question isn't whether you'll face life and death decisions. It's whether you'll be prepared to make the right ones. The Phoenix system exists because we believe that technology should serve human judgment, not replace it. That artificial intelligence should amplify human intuition, not eliminate it. That the best decisions come from combining computational power with human wisdom. Sarah smiled, feeling the weight of her challenge coin in her pocket. My call sign was Phoenix, and I spent 20 years rising from the ashes of combat to serve my country. For the past 15 years, I've been rising from the ashes of war to serve my community. Both missions mattered. Both required courage. Both saved lives. The difference is that now, when I hear that call sign, I don't think about what I destroyed. I think about what I helped build. What we helped build. A system that brings people home safely, that coordinates rescue operations, that turns technology into hope. As applause filled the auditorium, Sarah felt something she'd been searching for since leaving the military. Pride without guilt, purpose without conflict, service without warfare. After the ceremony, a young pilot approached her. "Captain Chen, I'm Lieutenant Maria Santos, Coast Guard. I wanted to thank you personally." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. "Santos, my aunt was the flight attendant who landed that hijacked plane in 2001. She told me about the Navy pilot who escorted them, who was prepared to make an impossible decision so she didn't have to." Maria smiled. She said that pilot gave her the courage to take control of the aircraft. Knowing someone was watching, someone was ready to act if she failed, it made her brave enough to try. "Your aunt was already brave," Sarah replied softly. "She just needed someone to believe in her." "That's what the Phoenix system does for us," Maria continued. "It doesn't make decisions for us, but it makes us brave enough to make the hard decisions ourselves, because we know we're not alone up there." As Maria walked away, Sarah understood something she'd never realized before. She hadn't failed in her military service when she was prepared to shoot down that civilian aircraft. She'd succeeded in creating the conditions where someone else could be the hero. Just as the Phoenix system didn't replace human pilots, it enabled them to be better than they ever thought possible. That evening, Sarah flew her P-51 Mustang over the Pacific Ocean as the sun set behind her. The radio was quiet, the sky was clear, and for the first time in decades, she felt completely at peace with the path her life had taken. "Tower, this is Phoenix," she called as she approached the airfield. "Coming home. Welcome home, Phoenix. You're cleared for landing." And as the vintage fighter touched down on the runway, Sarah Chen, pilot, warrior, guardian, and Phoenix, was exactly where she belonged. So I ask you, have you ever met someone whose quiet service concealed extraordinary expertise? Someone who channeled their past into a different kind of mission? Share their story in the comments, because here at Duty Stories, we believe that service takes many forms, and all of them matter. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe to help us honor those who continue serving in new ways, rising from the ashes of their past to build something better. Remember, sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with wisdom, technology, and the courage to keep serving even when the uniform changes. Until next time, look for the Phoenix in everyone you meet. You never know what fires they've survived or what they're building from the ashes.